I'm writing this from the smoking area outside Serenity Hills Rehabilitation Center, my hands shaking, not from withdrawal this time, but from the weight of what I need to confess. 6 months sober, and for the first time in a decade, I can see clearly what I destroyed. Not what the patriarchy destroyed. Not what my oppressive marriage destroyed. What I destroyed. My name is Linda, and I'm 53 years old. 10 years ago, I served my husband of 23 years divorce papers on his 45th birthday, in front of our family and friends, with our 4 daughters standing behind me like some feminist army I'd recruited. I thought I was brave. I thought I was empowered. I thought I was finally breaking free from a man who'd held me back my entire adult life. I was an idiot. A cruel, delusional idiot who threw away the best man I'd ever known because I got drunk on an ideology that told me I was a victim when I was actually blessed beyond measure. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from when I still had everything and was too poisoned to see it. Mike and I met in junior high. I asked him to the Sadie Hawkins dance because I was tired of waiting for boys to notice me. He was shy, studious, already working part-time to help his single mom. When he said yes, his whole face lit up like I'd given him the world. That should have been my first clue about who he really was, a man who saw me as a gift, not a given. We were inseparable after that. While other couples broke up and got back together with drama and tears, Mike and I just were. He proposed the night of our high school graduation with a ring he'd saved for by working extra shifts at the hardware store. "I know it's not much," he'd said, "but I promise I'll spend my life making sure you never want for anything." He kept that promise. God help me, he kept it even when I didn't deserve it. We got pregnant on our honeymoon. I was terrified. 18 and pregnant wasn't the plan. But Mike just held me and said, "We'll figure it out. You and me and this baby, we'll be okay." He worked construction during the day and went to night school for his engineering degree. I stayed home with baby Sarah, then Emma 2 years later, then Olivia, then finally Jessica. 4 girls in 8 years. Mike never complained, never made me feel like the pregnancies were inconvenient. After each birth, he'd look at our daughters like they were miracles, then look at me the same way and say, "Thank you for our family." Those early years were hard financially, but Mike made sure we never felt it. He'd skip lunch to save money, but always made sure I had spending money for coffee with the other moms. He'd wear the same work boots until they fell apart, but never let the girls go without dance classes or soccer uniforms. When promotions came that required travel or relocation, he turned them down. "My girls need stability," he'd say. "Money isn't everything." By the time Sarah hit high school, we'd found our rhythm. Mike had worked his way up to senior engineer, making good money. I ran our household like a well-oiled machine. PTA president, team mom, the house every kid wanted to hang out at. Our daughters were bright, confident, close to both of us. Our son Michael Jr. came along when I was 35, a surprise that Mike called our bonus blessing. We were happy. Actually happy. The kind of happy that I now realize most people never find. But even in happiness, there were moments. Small ones. Seeds that would later grow into the weeds that choked our marriage. I remember standing at the kitchen window one afternoon, watching my friend Carol drive off in her new Lexus, heading back to her marketing firm. She'd stopped by to show off photos from her trip to Paris. A business conference, she'd said, but the photos were all cafes and museums. "Must be nice," I'd murmured to myself. "What's that, honey?" Mike had asked, looking up from where he was helping Emma with her science project. "Nothing, just Carol's life seems exciting sometimes." He'd wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Would you want to trade? Her husband's on his 3rd affair, you know." "Of course not," I'd said, and I'd meant it. Mostly. But the seed was there, the tiny what-if that would lie dormant until Sarah came home from Berkeley with the water to make it grow. Then Sarah went to college. She chose Berkeley, despite Mike's concerns about the distance and the cost. Let her spread her wings, I'd argued. She's worked so hard for this. The changes started small, so small I almost missed them. First semester, she came home talking about her Intro to Gender Studies professor with stars in her eyes. Dr. Martinez is amazing, Mom. She's making me think about things I never questioned before. Like what? I'd asked, genuinely curious. Like, why do we automatically assume women should give up their careers for kids? It's just interesting to think about. Mike had been in the garage, so he missed this conversation. I'd felt a tiny flutter of something. Recognition, regret. I pushed it away. I chose to stay home, I told her. Nobody forced me. I know, Sarah said quickly. I'm not saying... I just think it's good to question things. Christmas break, she used the phrase emotional labor for the first time. We were decorating the tree, and Mike was directing where ornaments should go. Something he'd always done because he was particular about balance and symmetry. Isn't it exhausting? Sarah asked me quietly while Mike adjusted a strand of lights. What? Managing his feelings about something as simple as a Christmas tree. That's emotional labor, Mom. He just likes things a certain way, I defended. But later that night, when Mike spent 20 minutes rearranging the presents under the tree, I felt a flicker of irritation I'd never noticed before. Spring semester, the vocabulary expanded. Problematic. Heteronormative. Systemic. Words that sounded important and intellectual. Sarah would drop them casually into conversation, always watching for my reaction. The way Dad always expects dinner at 6 is kind of problematic, don't you think? He doesn't expect it, I'd say. We just always eat at 6. But why? Because that's when he gets home from work? So our whole family schedule revolves around him? I'd never thought of it that way. We ate at 6 because we always had. But Sarah's question lodged in my brain like a splinter. By sophomore year, the physical changes started. First, she stopped wearing makeup. I'm not performing femininity for the male gaze anymore, she announced over Thanksgiving, her face bare and defiant. Mike, who never commented on appearance, made the mistake of saying she looked tired. That's what women look like without makeup, Dad. Sorry if reality disappoints you. I wasn't disappointed, he said, confused. Just concerned you have dark circles. Because I'm studying. Because I'm doing important work. Not everyone can just clock out at 5 and leave their brain at the office. Mike worked until 7 most nights, bringing home projects to review after we went to bed. But I didn't defend him. I was too busy wondering if I looked tired too, under my carefully applied foundation. Emma came home from her freshman year quieter than Sarah, but somehow more dangerous. Where Sarah was fire, Emma was water, slowly eroding my certainties. I've been thinking, she said one day while helping me fold laundry, about how you never finished your degree. I didn't need to. Your father was making enough. But what if you'd wanted to? Would Dad have supported that? Of course he would have, I said automatically. But would he? We'd never discussed it. I'd never asked. Emma nodded thoughtfully. My roommate's mom went back to school at 45. She's a lawyer now. The comment sat with me for days. 45. I was 43. Olivia, my artist, came home from art school talking about challenging traditional narratives. She'd paint these disturbing portraits of faceless women in aprons, trapped in houses that looked suspiciously like ours. It's a commentary on domestic invisibility, she explained. Even Jessica, still in high school, started picking up the language from her sisters. Why do I have to help with dinner when Mikey doesn't? She'd ask. He's only 10, I'd explain. So gender roles are learned young. Mike noticed the changes but struggled to address them. He wasn't good with confrontation, never had been. When the girls were little and misbehaved, I was the disciplinarian while he was the soft touch. Now, faced with ideological rebellion, he retreated into work and silence. Talk to them, I urged one night after Sarah had spent dinner lecturing about the patriarchal institution of marriage. "What do I say?" he asked, looking genuinely lost. "I don't even understand half the words they use." This was Mike's flaw. When emotional situations got complex, he shut down. He could solve any engineering problem but couldn't navigate his daughter's growing hostility. Instead of engaging, he worked later. Instead of defending our life, he went quiet. "You're the man of the house," I said. "Act like it." The irony of that statement would hit me later, much later. The books Sarah gave me, I started with skepticism. But late at night, while Mike snored beside me, another flaw, he snored terribly and refused to see a doctor about it, I'd read by booklight. The authors wrote about women like me, women who'd given up dreams for family, women who'd disappeared into their roles as wives and mothers. "Did you know," I told Mike one night, "that Betty Friedan calls it the problem that has no name, the emptiness housewives feel?" He looked up from checking work emails on his phone, always working, even in bed. "Are you empty?" "I don't know, maybe." He set down his phone, concerned. "What can I do? Do you want to take classes, get a job? I've always said I'd support whatever you wanted." Had he always said that? I couldn't remember him ever explicitly offering. He hadn't discouraged me, but had he encouraged me either? The doubt crept in like fog. Emma, the strategic one, knew exactly which buttons to push. "Remember when you wanted to join that book club that met during Dad's dinner time? How he made that face?" "What face?" "You know, the disappointed face, the I guess I'll just eat alone face." Mike did make that face. Not angry, never angry, just disappointed. And I'd always changed my plans because of it. Was that control? Or was that just marriage? Sarah grew more radical with each semester, but it was Emma who really worked on me, and Olivia who provided the artistic ammunition with her increasingly dark paintings. Jessica watched it all, absorbing, choosing her moments to add perfectly timed barbs about double standards. My girls, who used to bake with me and plan their dream weddings, now sneered at anything feminine. Cooking was performing unpaid labor. Wanting to look pretty was male gaze conditioning. Being a stay-at-home mom was internalized misogyny, and somehow incrementally, I started believing them. I cut my hair short. A pixie cut that Mike tried to compliment, but I could see he didn't love. I stopped wearing dresses, stopped doing my makeup. "I'm not your Barbie doll," I snapped when he mentioned I looked tired. "I never said you were," he replied quietly. "I just asked if you were feeling okay." Everything became a battle. Him offering to help with dinner was performative allyship. Him working overtime to pay for 4 college tuitions was typical male need to be the provider. Him trying to plan a romantic anniversary dinner was expecting emotional labor. The house divided into camps. My daughters and me against Mike and little Mikey. My son, only 10, became the target of his sister's education. "Boys need to be taught not to rape," Sarah announced at dinner. Mike slammed his hand on the table, the only time I'd ever seen him truly angry. "He's 10 years old. He doesn't even understand what that means." "That's the point," Emma chimed in, the peacemaker with poison. "We need to start young. Break the cycle." "Get out." Mike's voice was deadly quiet. "All of you, leave this table, now." The girls looked at me, expecting me to defend them. And God help me, I did. "You can't silence women's voices in this house." I stood, shaking with righteous anger. "We have the right to speak." "Not about that. Not to him. He's a child." Mike picked up Mikey, who was crying. "I'm taking my son out for ice cream. When we get back, I expect apologies." They never apologized. Sarah called it tone policing. Emma explained it was fragility in the face of necessary conversations. Olivia painted a picture of a man covering a child's ears while the world burned. Jessica said nothing, but her silence felt like agreement. Instead, we had our first marriage counseling session, where I spent 50 minutes explaining how oppressed I was while Mike sat in stunned silence. The female therapist, fresh out of school, nodded sympathetically and gave me pamphlets about finding my voice. "Maybe," the therapist suggested gently to Mike, "you could examine why strong female voices make you uncomfortable." Mike had stared at her. "They accused my 10-year-old son of being a future rapist." "But don't you think that's coming from a place of generational trauma? Women have been silenced for so long." I should have seen it then, how even the therapist was feeding the narrative. But I was too deep in it, too convinced that my growing resentment was awakening rather than poisoning. For the next year, I found my voice all right. I used it to tear down everything Mike had spent 23 years building. "I'm not your servant," I'd scream when he asked what was for dinner, ignoring that he'd asked because he'd pick up takeout if I didn't feel like cooking. "I have value beyond being your wife," I'd rage when he tried to hold me, forgetting how he'd always encouraged my volunteer work, my friendships, my hobbies. "Stop controlling me," I'd accuse when he asked about my day, rewriting his interest as surveillance. My daughters cheered me on, each in their own way. Sarah was the ideological general, sending articles and organizing our liberation. Emma was the strategist, always knowing which wounds to salt. Olivia provided the visual propaganda with her art. And Jessica, my baby, watched and learned, occasionally dropping devastating observations that cut deeper because they came from the child I'd once considered untainted. Mike asking me to grab milk on my way home? Financial control? He'd asked because I was driving past the store. He did the shopping every other week. Mike planning our vacation, denying me agency. He'd researched beaches because I'd said I wanted a beach vacation. He'd bookmarked 3 for me to choose from. Mike working late to meet deadlines? Abandoning emotional labor to me. He was trying to finish projects so he could take time off for Jessica's graduation. The man who'd spent over 2 decades cherishing me became, in my poisoned mind, my oppressor. His every flaw, the snoring, the emotional withdrawal when stressed, his need for routine, his inability to articulate feelings, became evidence of patriarchal oppression rather than simple human imperfection. The birthday party was Sarah's idea. "Serve him papers publicly," she said. "Make a statement. Show him he can't hide behind social niceties anymore." I was drunk on my own perceived courage as I handed him those papers in front of his brother, his mother, our neighbors. "As of today," I announced, my daughters flanking me like soldiers, "I will no longer be manipulated and abused by you." The look on his face. God, the look on his face. Not anger, not even surprise, really. Just grief. Like watching something precious die in real time. He looked at our daughters, all done up in their protest uniforms of colored hair and defiant expressions, then at Mikey, 14 and devastated, then back at me. He didn't say a word, just nodded once and walked out of his own party. The divorce was war, and I was determined to win. My daughters and I spent hours crafting our testimony, how he'd controlled the finances, by working and paying all our bills, how he'd isolated me, by providing a home where I could raise our children, how he'd emotionally manipulated me, by telling me he loved me every single day. Sarah had coached me well. Cry when you talk about feeling trapped. The judge will sympathize with a woman escaping abuse. Abuse. That word haunts me now. Real abuse is what I did to him in that courtroom, painting the best man I'd ever known as a monster while he sat there, broken, watching his family testify against him. His lawyer tried. Mike's brother testified about how Mike had always put family first. His mother, tears streaming, told how he'd call her every week asking advice on being a better husband. Friends described a man who spoke of his wife and children like they were his whole world, but 4 crying women telling tales of oppression, Trump character witnesses every time. I got it all. The house, the cars, his entire 401k. Over $350,000 he'd saved for our retirement by living frugally and investing wisely. The only thing I gave up was Mikey. And honestly, I was relieved. He'd chosen his father's side. He was tainted by toxic masculinity. Let Mike deal with that. The day he moved out, loading his few allowed possessions into his truck, Mikey beside him, I felt victorious. Sarah popped champagne. "To freedom!" we toasted. Freedom? What a joke. The first month was exhilarating. I redecorated, removing all traces of Mike's traditional tastes. I joined women's groups, went to rallies, dated men who called themselves male feminists, and treated me like garbage while spouting the right buzzwords. The second month, the bills came. I'd never realized how much Mike handled. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, maintenance. It was overwhelming. The 401k money would last, but not forever. I needed a job, but my 20-year resume gap made me unemployable at anything beyond minimum wage. "Ask Dad for help," Jessica suggested tentatively. "Never," Sarah interjected. "We don't need male salvation." By month 6, the sisterhood was fracturing. Emma needed money for graduate school. Olivia wanted a car. Jessica missed her father. Sarah, the ringleader, was drowning in student loans and depression, unable to maintain relationships because every man fell short of her impossible standards. I started drinking to cope. Wine with dinner became wine with lunch became wine for breakfast. The men I dated were progressively worse. Jake, who borrowed money and never returned it. Marcus, who screamed at me for emasculating him when I asked him to help with dishes. Tony, who cheated because monogamy is a patriarchal construct. 2 years after the divorce, I drunk-dialed Mike at 3 a.m. "Hello?" His voice was alert, concerned. Even after everything, he answered. "I miss you," I slurred. Silence. Then, "Linda, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" "I need you." "I'm with someone now. I'm happy. Please, take care of yourself." He hung up gently, but it felt like a slap. He was happy. Without me. The injustice of it burned. 3 years post-divorce, Sarah had a breakdown. The strong, fierce daughter who'd led our revolution was in therapy, on medication, unable to function. "I can't connect with anyone," she sobbed. "Every interaction feels like a power struggle. I'm so alone." Emma got pregnant by a man who ghosted her the moment she told him. She had an abortion, then another, then a third. "My body, my choice," she said, but her eyes were hollow. Olivia went vegan, then raw vegan, then breatharian. We found her unconscious in her apartment, severely malnourished, her body eating itself. Jessica, my baby, met a conservative Christian boy who treated her like gold. She did a complete 180, rejecting everything her sisters had taught her. "I want what you and Dad had," she told me, "before you ruined it." 4 years post-divorce, I hit rock bottom, literally, fell down the stairs drunk, broke my wrist. The ER doctor, seeing my blood alcohol level, recommended rehab. I laughed. "I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a liberated woman." But sitting in that hospital bed, no one visiting because I'd alienated everyone, I saw the truth. I wasn't liberated. I was pathetic. A 50-year-old woman with no career, no relationship, no real friendships, and daughters who were as miserable as I was. The final humiliation came when I ran into Mike's sister at the grocery store. She showed me pictures from Mikey's high school graduation. Mike looked good, healthy, fit, smiling. Beside him stood a woman, attractive but not flashy, looking at him the way I used to. "He's happy," his sister said, not unkindly. "Really happy. Mikey got into Princeton, full scholarship." Princeton, where Sarah had dropped out junior year, too depressed to continue, where Emma had been rejected, where Olivia hadn't even applied, but Mikey, the son I'd abandoned, the child I'd let my daughters torment, was thriving. That night, desperate and drunk, I showed up at Mike's new house in nothing but a trench coat. Don't judge. Sarah had sent me an article about reclaiming your sexuality, and I was out of my mind. Mike answered the door, took one look at me and closed it in my face. No words, no expression, just done. I stood there, nearly naked in his driveway, finally understanding. I'd had a man who loved me completely, and I'd thrown him away for an ideology that left me empty. I'd had daughters who were happy, and I'd turned them into miserable activists. I'd had a son who adored me, and I'd chosen my liberation over him. The drinking got worse. Blackouts, embarrassing scenes, emergency room visits. My daughters tried interventions, but I was too far gone. "You did this to me," I'd scream at them. "You and your feminism destroyed my life." "We were just kids," Sarah would cry. "You were the adult. You chose this." She was right. They were wrong about so much, but about that, she was right. I chose it. Every step of the way, I chose ideology over love, anger over gratitude, empowerment over actual power. The power of being loved and needed and cherished. The night I nearly died from alcohol poisoning, Mikey came to the hospital. 24 years old, law degree from Princeton, engaged to a lovely girl who stood beside him. He looked so much like Mike it took my breath away. "Why?" I asked him. "Why are you here?" "Because despite everything," he said quietly, "you're still my mother. Dad taught me that family is complicated, that people make mistakes, that sometimes love means showing up even when someone doesn't deserve it." Mike, even now, even after everything, his goodness shaped our son. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." "I know," Mikey said. "Dad knows too. He forgives you. He's moved on, but he forgives you." Forgiveness I didn't deserve from a man I'd crucified. That's what broke me. Not the divorce, not the loneliness, not even the alcohol. The grace of the man I'd painted as a monster. I checked into rehab the next day. 6 months of facing hard truths, of admitting that feminism hadn't freed me. It had imprisoned me in bitterness. That Mike hadn't oppressed me. He'd cherished me. That being a wife and mother hadn't diminished me. It had been my greatest accomplishment. The therapist here, an older woman who'd lived through actual oppression, doesn't mince words. You had a good man who loved you, provided for you, respected you, and you threw him away because some bitter women convinced you that being loved was oppression. That's not feminism. That's stupidity. She's right. The real feminism would have been recognizing my power as the heart of our home. The real strength would have been building up my family, not tearing it down. The real liberation would have been choosing gratitude over grievance. Now I live in a small apartment, work as a cashier, and see my daughters sporadically. They're all married now, trying to build what I destroyed, but struggling because I never showed them how. Sarah battles depression. Emma fights trust issues. Olivia struggles with her health. Only Jessica, who rejected the poison earliest, has found happiness. Mike remarried 3 years ago. His wife is a pediatric nurse who posts pictures of their blended family, her 2 kids, their new baby, and Mikey with his wife. They look complete. The life I threw away, rebuilt without me. Sometimes I drive by the old house. New family lives there now. The garden Mike planted for me is overgrown. The swing set he built is gone. All traces of our life erased, like it never existed. But it did exist. For 23 years, I had everything. A man who adored me, children who needed me, a home filled with love, purpose, meaning, belonging, all the things feminism promised I'd find by leaving, I already had. I'm writing this as a warning. To any woman reading this who's being told she's oppressed because her husband loves her, provides for her, wants to be with her, run from those voices. To any mother being convinced that raising children is beneath her. It's the most important job in the world. To anyone who thinks the grass is greener in the land of liberation, it's not grass. It's astroturf. Fake plastic, and it burns when you fall. Mike, if you ever read this, though I know you won't, you've moved on too completely. I'm sorry. You were never my oppressor. You were my blessing. The patriarchy didn't ruin my life. I did. Feminism didn't free me. It destroyed me. And to my daughters who might see this, I failed you, not by being a stay-at-home mom, but by abandoning that role. Not by serving your father, but by stopping. Not by being traditional, but by letting bitterness replace tradition. The movement I thought would liberate me became my prison. The man I thought was holding me back was actually holding me up. The life I thought was limiting me was actually my greatest achievement. I'm sober now, but I'll be recovering from my choices for the rest of my life. Alone. Because some mistakes can't be undone, some bridges can't be rebuilt, and some men, the good ones, don't give second chances to women who set their lives on fire. Mike was one of the good ones, and I burned us all down for nothing.